So you finally decided to travel to Thailand. You've wandered its golden temples, relaxed on turquoise beaches, tasted food so good it feels unreal, and met locals whose kindness lingers long after your conversations. The trip feels like magic. And of course, you want something to take home, a souvenir, a memory to keep forever. Then you see it, a small figure of a child, painted in gold, smiling sweetly. It feels innocent enough, until you learn its name, Kuman Thong. What you thought was a souvenir might just be the beginning of something you never invited into your life. Two travelers learned that the hard way. And these are their stories. In the winter of 2017, a young man from Germany arrived in Thailand. His name was Lucas, 26 years old, and he had just landed a job as a junior software engineer in Frankfurt. He was due to begin in a few months, and before stepping into what he called the long tunnel of office life, he wanted to experience a taste of freedom. And so he set out for Thailand with a backpack, a handful of savings, and a restless eagerness to live while he still could. For weeks, Lucas travelled across the country. He fell in love with the chaos of Pattaya's nightlife, the calm of Sukhotai's temples, and the quiet villages tucked between rice fields in Isan. He described Thailand to his family back home as a dream that doesn't end when you wake up. But like every traveller nearing the end of his journey, Lucas wanted something tangible, an object to carry a fragment of that dream back with him. In one of Bangkok's night markets, stalls overflowed with carved elephants, silken scarves, and jewellery made from jade. But it was a small figure tucked away in the corner of one vendor's table that caught Lucas's eye. A child, painted gold, smiling faintly, with wide, curious eyes. The seller leaned forward and whispered, "This is a Kuman Thong." He explained that it was no ordinary souvenir. It was a guardian, a bringer of luck, a silent companion for the lonely. Lucas, amused and intrigued, felt an odd pull toward the figure. Perhaps it was the innocence of the smile, or perhaps the thought of having a guardian while travelling alone appealed to him. This was indeed not a cliché souvenir, like elephant pants or a Chang tank top from an ordinary 7-Eleven. He paid a modest price, tucked the figure into his bag, and thought little of it. In the days that followed, little things began to trouble him. His belongings would shift places in the shared room, though none of his roommates admitted to touching them. Lucas was careful with his valuables, keeping them locked inside the metal locker at the foot of his bed with a small padlock. Yet more than once, he returned to find the lock still fastened, but the items inside strangely rearranged, as if someone or something had been playing with them. One evening, while Skyping his sister, she suddenly frowned and asked why a little boy had wandered into his room. Lucas turned quickly, scanning the space behind him. His roommates were out for the night, and the narrow corridor leading to the door was empty. He laughed it off, but after the call ended, the room felt unseen was still standing nearby, watching. By the end of his trip, Lucas no longer felt relaxed. The cheerful energy he had carried seemed to drain away once he reached the southern beaches. In Phuket, his motorbike rental mysteriously broke down on a quiet road, even though the mechanic swore it was in good condition. As he wheeled it back toward downtown, he noticed he was being followed, not by a person, but by the sound of small footsteps on the gravel behind him. Each time he stopped, the footsteps stopped too. That night, Lucas lay in his hostel bed, staring at the ceiling, his ears straining for every creak and shuffle in the dark. He told himself he was tired, overthinking, yet the memory of those tiny steps clung to him, echoing louder in his mind than they had on the road. By morning, he felt hollow, like sleep had given him no rest at all. Days later, in Krabi, he booked a boat trip to the famous Railay Beach's limestone cliffs, only for it to be cancelled suddenly after the captain claimed bad weather was coming, though the skies remained perfectly clear all day. When he finally confessed his worries to a fellow backpacker, he admitted he wasn't sleeping well, that he kept waking at the same time every night, just before 3 a.m, to the sound of soft, steady breathing near his bed. When his flight finally came, Lucas packed quickly, accidentally leaving behind souvenirs he had bought for friends. Yet the Kuman Thong stayed with him. He couldn't explain why, but he felt he had to bring it along. 2 days later, he met his parents for dinner in Frankfurt. Lucas gave them some postcards and magnets and showed them his intriguing golden boy souvenir. His parents described him as cheerful, full of stories about Thailand, laughing as he described the chaos of Bangkok traffic and the unforgettable taste of durian. That was the last time they saw him. After that evening, Lucas stopped answering calls and messages. At first, his family assumed he was busy preparing for work, but days turned into weeks and the silence grew heavier. When his apartment was eventually opened, his belongings were neatly arranged. His passport, wallet, and clothes were all there. Only the Kuman Thong was missing. Neighbours recalled hearing something strange in the nights that followed, light footsteps in the hallway, and the faint, playful laughter of a child. Lucas's story is just one of many. Previously, in one of our episodes, we talked about the Okiku doll, a doll in Japan that's kept in a temple and cared for by monks, said to hold the spirit of a little girl. In that video, we briefly mentioned other dolls with similar stories. In Thailand, there are 2 figures like this, the Luk Tep and the Kuman Thong. Both need to be cared for. But there's an important difference. The Luk Tep is said to have a benevolent spirit willingly attached to it. On the other hand, the Kuman Thong was created by powerful sorcerers who wanted a spiritual companion. These companions were meant to be real guardians tied to the figure itself. And here's where the disturbing part starts. Thai necromancers were said to bind the spirit of a child who never had the chance to grow up. A tiny, supernatural presence meant to watch over, protect, and stay close to its owner. In return, all the Kuman Thong asked for was to be cared for, fed, and offered small gifts. Some owners even talked to it as if it were a child. Do that, and they say the spirit might reward you with protection, fortune, maybe even a warning about something that isn't right. But the flip side is, if you neglect it or treat it like an ordinary trinket, people speak of strange occurrences and misfortune that defy explanation. You can find Kuman Thong in markets, temples, even tucked between amulets and charms on small shop tables. In the summer of 2019, a British man named Richard travelled to Bangkok. He was 42 years old, a history teacher by trade, though those who knew him well would say he was something more than that, a collector of curiosities. Richard's flat in London was crowded with artifacts and oddities, dusty volumes on folklore, antique masks from Africa, hand-carved dolls from South America. He believed these objects carried the memories of the cultures they came from, and he prided himself on owning things no one else dared to. He gathered all these objects in one place, a room he proudly called his relic room. It was where he admired his strange trophies, surrounded himself with forgotten cultures. He realized then he had nothing from Asia, and when his next paid holidays from the school he worked for were closer, he found there an opportunity to increase his collection. He chose his next destination to be Thailand. The temples, the markets, the winding alleys of the Land of Smiles promised treasures that would make his inventory stand out. He wasn't interested in postcards or magnets. He was looking for something unusual, something with a story. One humid evening in Buriram, Richard found himself at a sprawling night bazaar. Lanterns glowed above the stalls, and the air was thick with incense and the sound of traffic drifting from the main road. It was there, half hidden among tables of charms and amulets, that he noticed a small golden figure of a child. The vendor lowered her voice when Richard asked about it. Kuman Thong Ka, a guardian spirit, she explained, to protect a household and bring fortune. To Richard, it was perfect, strange, steeped in old Thai folklore, and rare enough that most tourists would pass it by. He bought it without hesitation. When the figure finally took its place in his relic room in his flat, displayed in a glass case alongside his other finds, Richard felt satisfied. He never once left offerings at its base, nor spoke to it as the vendor suggested. To him, the Kuman Thong was a relic, nothing more. As much as Richard respected Thai culture and traditions, he wasn't religious and labelled everything that science cannot explain as superstition. But over the months that followed, Richard began to notice something strange. Whenever he passed near the Kuman Thong, a sudden, sharp headache would pulse at his temples, accompanied by an unshakable sense of unease, like the air around the figure had grown heavier. At first, he dismissed it as stress. The school year had just started, his students were rowdy, and grading kept him up late. But soon, his colleagues noticed small changes. Richard, usually patient and witty in the classroom, had begun snapping at students over trivial mistakes. He found excuses to leave lessons early, claiming migraines. Papers piled up unmarked on his desk, while he spent longer evenings pacing in the relic room. Staring at the golden boy, he told himself he was still in control, that nothing was wrong. Yet each day, the line between work and obsession thinned a little more. One night, he woke to a faint sound drifting through his flat. At first, he thought it might be a neighbour, or perhaps the hum of the city outside. But then he realised it was coming from the living room, a faint lullaby, off-key and broken, threading through the silence, angelic in tone, yet somehow unnerving. Richard froze, and his heart started to race. His chest felt tight, and a cold sweat prickled his skin. The sound was not loud, but it filled the room, pressing against his ears and his thoughts. It carried a strange familiarity, like something he should remember, but couldn't. With each quiet hum, an unease gnawed at him, a silent insistence that he was not alone. He wanted to move, to see where it was coming from, but something held him in place. The hum continued, ebbing and flowing, filling the space with a presence he could neither see nor fully understand. And in that moment, the golden figure in the glass case, so still, seemed to watch him with a new, knowing awareness. Richard sank down against the wall, just sitting there, frozen, staring at the figure. He had no idea how long he stayed like that. Maybe minutes, maybe longer. The humming slowly faded, leaving this heavy, quiet feeling that seemed to stick to him. When he finally got up, the room felt suffocating, and for the first time, he couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, the figure had never been just a mere souvenir to look at. After that night, Richard couldn't stop thinking about the figure. Whenever he was reading or making tea in his relic room, he'd catch himself glancing at the golden boy, and the unease would spike again, like it was watching him. A week later, on a quiet evening, he felt that same pull. The humming started again, soft and hesitant, almost teasing, coming from the living room. He shuffled closer, trying to tell himself he was imagining it, but the closer he got, the heavier the air felt, pressing in on his chest. And then he noticed it. The glass case was slightly ajar. Richard's stomach dropped. For a moment, he froze. Panic surged through him. He searched the room, lifting cushions, peeking behind books, even checking the cupboards. And he found absolutely nothing. Exhausted, he finally sank into a chair, trying to convince himself it had to be a trick of the light, a misplaced object, until the next evening when he returned home. The Kuman Thong was back, sitting exactly where it had been in the case, but something was off. Its painted face had cracked across the mouth, forming a smile that looked disturbingly naughty. Richard couldn't take it anymore. The headaches, the anxiety, the feeling of being watched, it was wearing him down. So, reluctantly, he decided to sell the Kuman Thong to another collector, a fellow enthusiast who shared his obsession with oddities and relics. He warned the man, insisted, almost desperately, that the figure was unusual, that it wasn't a simple object. Take care of it. Feed it with milk or juice. Offer it incense and pay your respects, he said, voice low, or it will take care of you. For a while, it seemed to work. Richard told himself it was gone, that the weight on his chest had lifted. But months later, he returned home one evening, and there it was. The Kuman Thong was back, sitting inside the glass case as if it had never left. Only now its painted face had twisted into a mischievous, almost knowing grin. Something broke in Richard that night. His mind, once sharp and skeptical, spiraled into dread. He stopped teaching and kept himself in the flat. Every hour of his day bent around that figure, as though his whole existence had been reduced to a duel of wills, his against its. The headaches returned, sharper than ever, and the humming began again, soft, childlike, circling him in every room. His neighbours could hear him talking back to someone, or something, arguing in low, frantic mumbles, then laughing at nothing, then falling silent for hours. By the time his neighbours heard the noises, strange growls, maniacal laughter, erratic pacing, it was already too late. One morning, Richard was simply gone. No note, no trace, nothing to explain. His flat stood open and eerily silent. When a neighbour finally stepped inside, calling out his name, the rooms were uncannily untouched, almost staged. Books neatly stacked, artifacts still in place, not a chair out of line. And in the relic room, waiting quietly in its glass case, was the Kuman Thong. Its golden paint gleamed faintly in the morning light, its cracked smile wider than ever, and its glassy eyes fixed, unblinking. There's this shared idea. Some objects are not just objects. They watch, they wait, they respond. It seems no culture is free from the fear that something innocent, childlike, or even playful might hide a presence far stranger than it appears. A figure meant to bring luck or protection can just as easily unsettle, challenge, or haunt, depending on how it is treated. And that's what makes these stories linger, because the rules are never fully explained, And the consequences, well, they're left to the imagination. So the next time you wander through a Thai market and see the golden smile of an innocent boy or girl staring up at you, remember, some souvenirs carry memories. Others carry something else entirely.